entitled "Aunt tries to control our family but ends up arrested." Another post about a parent volunteering their adult child reminded me of this. It happened to my cousin, but I was there for the majority of the story. I remember it so clearly for a couple of reasons, in addition to just having a good memory. It was the first trip after my father had died, and it was, sadly, the last trip I took with my mother. She died less than a year later. TL divided by doctor at the bottom. My aunt was always playing the big shot of solving people's problems, but using my cousin as the actual person to take on the problem. Always for free. If someone insisted on paying, he kept the money. Need a babysitter, a ride, house cleaned, yard mowed, errands run. Oh, my daughter can do it. As far as my aunt was concerned, the only reason Emily existed was to cater to her. Emily was her ultimate trophy. He was entitled long before it became a huge thing. Cast, E entitled Aunt, Emily cousin, Mike Emily's boyfriend, MACCR, PO1 police officer 1, PO2 police officer 2. Judge. My aunt has always been entitled. It's her personality type. My mother couldn't stand her little sister, so we tried to avoid her, while still maintaining contact with her husband and child. My uncle, their brother, lived further south in the States, so we always tried to avoid knowing when we were visiting. On this trip, I was staying with my cousin for a couple of weeks in the summer, and we were going to do the tourist things. He thought that the university not being in session meant that cousin was slave labor. One day Emily decided that enough was enough. She was supposed to run errands for a friend of E and had told her mother she had plans. Her mother, as usual, acted as though Emily had agreed and expected her to comply. Emily just didn't run the errand for the friend as demanded. It was that simple. My mother and I had arrived about 10 minutes before the phone rang. He called, and though this was back during landlines, she was screaming so loudly that both my mother and I could hear both sides clearly. How dare you embarrass me with my friends? You call Mrs. Noname and apologize immediately. You are grounded for a month and you may not drive the car at all. Now you make that call and go run those errands now. If anyone can explain how she was supposed to do this without using the car, I'd like to know. Emily, Mom, I'm 22. I do not live in your house, you do not pay my bills, and you do not own my car. Run the errands yourself. I have plans. My mom was a little nervous leaving us at that point. It's a mom thing ... And as she has met her sister thing, even though we were both fine. She left just after meeting Emily's boyfriend. We left and went to a water park and a few other things. We got back to the house and were talking about where to have dinner. Mom insisted on paying for us to go someplace really nice for dinner that night. We get back and Emily's car is gone. She called and asked where it was. Emily, Mom, do you have my car? Yes, I do. Your father brought me over so I could check and see if you had obeyed me. I told you that you were grounded and you were not there when I arrived. I'm keeping the car for a month, but I'm going to let Mrs. Noname borrow it because you have been so horrible to her. Emily, Mom, that's stealing. I want my car back now or I'm going to report it stolen. No, Mrs. Noname can't drive my car. I'm your mother. What I say goes, Missy. You need to learn some respect and to get it through your head that I'm in charge and you are the child. You don't own anything ... It's mine because I am your mother. The police will likely arrest you for wasting their time. Emily hangs up and looks at me. She is so angry she is crying in rage. Emily, ACCER, if I call the police she's going to know you are here. Me, I can live with that. That fallout is a whole other story. She picks up the phone and calls the police. Tells them the car has been taken without her permission and where it is. Mike drives us over there. We do not want to miss the show. PO1 knocks on the door. E answers. Hello, officers. Do you need something? PO1, ma'am. The vehicle in the drive matches the description and location of a vehicle reported stolen. It's my car. I took it from my daughter because she is grounded from using it for being disobedient and disrespectful. PO2, I see. May we have a word with her, please? Looking very smug. She doesn't live here. PO1, who had noticed us across the street, you three. Come over here, please. PO1, did one of you call us? Emily, I did. It's my car, officer. My mother seems to think that she has control over it and me. It's my car. I'm your mother and you have to obey me. It's the law. Tell her, officers. PO2, actually, ma'am, there is no such law. Your daughter is an adult. There most certainly is such a law. I'm going to report you to your chief for not knowing it. I may even sue. PO1 to cousin, may I see the car registration and your license, please? Emily hands them to him. PO1, ma'am, this car is registered in the name of your daughter and only your daughter. It's her car and you have no right to drive it. He looks at the registration the officer is showing her and then snatches Emily's license from him and slams the door. The police officers look at each other for a moment and then shrug and ring the bell again. He answers it, looking very smug. P01, ma'am, I'm going to need you to return the license, now. He hands him the license that she has cut into several pieces. Now she can't drive because she doesn't have a license. She looks at Emily as though she just scored some odd victory. Then she finally notices me. ACCR, what are you doing here? Me, just trying to have a nice visit with my cousin. She has hated me for years. You need to leave. I didn't give you permission to visit. Where is your mother? Me, I don't need your permission. My mother is not here. I can travel without her. P01, ma'am, you are under arrest for destruction of government property. Apparently cutting up a valid license is a felony in some places. Who knew? And grand theft of this car. You can't arrest me. I'm her mother. I have rights. P02, yes, you do. He then reads them to her. The officer explains to us that until she destroyed the license, he had been willing to issue an appearance ticket. Then instead of being arrested, she would just have had to appear in front of the judge. And get a fine. This was a much bigger deal. Emily ran into the house to tell her father what had happened. We all chatted for a little bit until the phone rang. It was telling him to call their attorney. We left. I drove the car back to Emily's and took her to get her license replaced the next morning. The attorney called by my uncle apparently didn't know my aunt, and he showed up at the first hearing, a week later, to try and get it dismissed. It looked to be going her way at first. The attorney, Your Honor, this is a family matter. It's simply a case of a mother disciplining her child and the child calling the police because her mother grounded her from using the car. Judge, so she got mad and called the police, and she, not knowing that it was a crime to destroy the license, did so. The attorney, yes, Your Honor, that's pretty much it. Judge, prosecutor, do you have nothing better to do today? Prosecutor, no, Your Honor, I don't. I consider it rather important. When a 22-year-old woman has her car stolen, it doesn't matter who stole it. She has just as much of a right to justice as someone who has their car stolen by a stranger. Judge, 22. The victim is 22. Prosecutor, yes, Your Honor. The victim is a 22-year-old woman who is the sole owner of the vehicle in question. Her mother became enraged at her daughter. She then went to her daughter's home, stole her car, and later destroyed her license. The attorney, Your Honor, I was not aware of the age or living situation of the victim. I was under the impression that the child was a minor who resides with her parents. He was sitting there still looking smug. Her attorney was sweating bullets. Judge, do you realize that these are very serious charges, and if convicted you face up to 8 years in prison? For what? I have the right to discipline my child as I see fit. She disobeyed me. She will think twice before doing it again. Judge, no, you don't. You have the right to discipline your child within the confines of the law. You have stepped outside of that parameter. You stole your daughter's car. I'm her mother, it's my right. It isn't really theft because she is my child and her property belongs to me by law. Judge, where did you get your law degree? I don't have one. Judge, then let me be the first to explain to you that your child is a legal adult. Period. You have no right to anything of hers without her express consent. Period. You may not take her car without her permission. Period. You may not enter her home without her permission. Period. Do you understand that? You don't know what you are talking about. I'm her mother. That gives me the right. I'm in charge. Judge, no, ma'am, I quote am in charge. This case will be held over for trial. I went home a week later. He eventually took a plea deal where she had 2 years probation and had to take parenting classes. The parenting classes were Mike's idea and the prosecutor thought it was great. We laughed hysterically over that because my cousin is an only child. LOL. Emily and Mike married a year later. And moved the hell away from there. This took place about 30 years ago. He maintained for the rest of her life that the judges, there were 5 for different status hearings, didn't know what the hell they were doing, and she was right. Crazy aunt tries to have me arrested for murder. Victim objects. Crazy aunt tries to have me arrested for murder. Victim objects. XL. Edited to add, this all took place around 30 years ago. It's all long buried, along with the crazy aunt. If you watch television shows from the 70s and 80s, you will notice odd things. People smoking at work, on planes, even in hospitals. Telephones have cords. At a police station, there are no computers on the desks and everyone is smoking. Things have changed a lot since then. That includes mental health standards and police procedures. Please keep that in mind. Caller ID had not been invented. There were no mass-market mobile phones, and the ones that existed were for the filthy rich and had limited use due to technology. It typically took a week to get your photos back, and there were no selfies. Wearing a seat belt was optional, as were child safety seats. Car windows had to be manually rolled down. It was a different world. These events happened a long time ago. Several people have asked about the fallout I mentioned in my post about my entitled Crazy Aunt. I'm renaming Entitled Aunt to Ka for Crazy Aunt, as per the request of so many who were getting confused by E. If you don't want to read the original story, my crazy aunt steals the car belonging to her daughter and gets arrested for that and destroying her driver's license. Aunt posted a $500 US bond and had to appear in court the following week for the first hearing as her attorney was going to attempt to get it dismissed. Just to clarify, the attorney in question spoke only to my aunt and had only her version of the events. In spite of what you may see on television, that is generally how it works. Most attorneys don't investigate matters themselves and go off of what their client says, and any official documentation provided by the opposition, in this case, the state. Anyway, this is what happened starting the day after that arrest and leading up to that hearing. To say that hell broke loose the next day is putting it mildly. Even though my cousin Emily had a ticket written by the officer from the night before stating that she had a valid license, and to call it in if necessary, we opted to have me drive to the license branch to get a replacement. It only took a few minutes and we were on our way to the museum. We were both a little nervous because my aunt hadn't called or anything, and with her silence was something to be worried about. We left the museum to get some lunch and my cousin went to the restroom while I waited at the kiosk. As I'm standing there, a police officer approaches me. There are 3 others milling about, looking very out of place in that area. You know, the fake I'm supposed to be here and need to look fake busy behavior. The officer asks me for identification, and as I go to pull my license out for him, I asked him what was going on and why he needed to see it. Me, sure officer, let me get it. What's going on? Oh, I have a report that you are an endangered runaway involved in the trafficking of narcotics. I stopped cold and stared at the officer. He was not kidding. I started laughing. He was not amused. My cousin approached us. Me, I don't suppose the name of the person who gave you the tip is Crazy Aunt. Oh, I can't give that information out. Me hands him my license. As you can see, I'm over the age of being considered a runaway. I was 21. I'm also not involved with narcotics of any kind, and if you need to discuss this further, you can contact my attorney, and please tell my crazy aunt I said to drop dead. Oh, I'm sorry for bothering you, but we had to check. Me, I get that. Maybe I was an endangered runaway, and until you check you can't possibly know that. What you should know, however, is that your source was arrested last night for stealing a car and destroying government property. Oh, well, I'll check on that when I get back. Maybe we need to add another charge to her list. Have a nice day. Cousin and I get our food and head back to her place. When we arrive, there are about 30 messages on her answering machine for you young people. It was a primitive form of voicemail. Several were from my brother. It seems that my aunt, delusional as ever, called him and told him I had been arrested for drug trafficking and was in really serious trouble. He was a little concerned. I called him back and told him everything. Thankfully, he hadn't booked a flight to get to me, so Ka failed on that front. I told him our plans for the evening, and he told me to be very cautious around my aunt. I told him not to worry, I'd be fine. The other messages were from Crazy Aunt to me, demanding that I leave, explaining that I'm not allowed by law to visit that state without her permission, or without being with a parent or legal guardian. The world was a strange place in her head, and she was going to have me arrested if I didn't leave. Naturally, she blamed me for her arrest the previous evening. Emily and I went out for dinner and to attend the concerts in the park series that was going on that week, and I had the feeling I was being followed. I was trying to pinpoint where my crazy aunt was in the crowd when Emily said, softly, straight ahead, 3 o'clock. Yup, there she was. Unlike everyone else who was facing the band, she was staring at us. Just staring. We decided to cut the evening short and went home. I like weird, but that was sinister. About an hour later, there was a banging on the door. It was the police. Again, we let them in. They had a tip that it was a drug house and asked if we minded them searching it. Of course we minded. We asked if they had a warrant, and suddenly my crazy aunt appears. Po, ma'am, you can't be here right now. Ka, my daughter lives here. Po, I'm sorry, ma'am, you still will have to wait outside. Me, so, you gave them another false tip. Ka, no, I told you that you would be arrested and I was right. If you aren't hiding drugs, then why do you care if there is a warrant? Answer me that. Me, because privacy is important to us as citizens in a free country. Po, ma'am, no one is being arrested. We were following up on a tip and apparently you are the one that made the accusation. Ka, arrest her, she isn't supposed to be here. Po, why not? Ka, because she doesn't have my permission to be here. I've told her specifically that she is not allowed to visit my daughter without my permission. Po, do you own this property? Ka, no. My daughter lives here, so it's my home too. Emily, no, it's not your home. I invited a CCER here, now please leave us alone. Ka, she doesn't have my permission to even be in this state. Poe, your permission is not required to visit this state ... or even this person. They are both adults. The officers. This woman has now made 2 false complaints against me, harassed me, and threatened me. Is there any chance you can arrest her, lose her paperwork for about 10 days? By then I'll be home. Call, they can't do that. I have every right to keep you away. Besides, I have to be in court next week because of you. Poe, why does she have to be in court? Emily, because she stole my car and torn up my license yesterday. Poe, that was her. I heard about that at the station this morning. Me, what are my options? Poe, I'm sorry, but we can't lose her paperwork. Though I certainly sympathize with you. You can, however, press charges against her if you like. It would get her out of your hair until morning, at least. Me, I'll take it. I signed the form and she was arrested, again. This time she posted $1,000 and was released. Because the police clearly don't understand the law and how she is right, she goes back to trying to harass me and control Emily. The problem was that now she couldn't find us. While she was busy being arrested and bonding out, I talked to my mom and her brother and sister-in-law. Mom got us a hotel suite booked under the maiden name of my good aunt. Emily and I packed up and moved to the hotel. 4 days later, there is a knock on the hotel room door. I answer it to find the police standing there. This was different. 2 were in uniform and 2 were in regular clothes, detectives. Oh boy, I sighed, told them I'm not a runaway and there are no drugs but come on in anyway and offered them some of our soda supply. They declined. Detective, do you know why we are here? Me, not specifically, but if I were to guess I'd say my crazy aunt has cooked up some new story to sell to you. Detective, do you know where we can find Emily? Me, yes. Detective, is this a confession? Me, to what? Detective, to her murder. Me, what? Detective, your aunt says that you have always hated your cousin and that 4 days ago you got her out of the way, and then killed Emily and dumped her body. We would like to know where her remains are to give her family closure. Cooperation would go a long way here. Me, first, crazy aunt is the one that has always hated me. It's a long story. Emily is one of my best friends as well as my cousin. Second, I not only didn't kill her, she isn't dead. Detective, then where is she? Me, taking a shower. We just got back from the pool and chlorine does nasty things to her curls. She'll be out in a minute. Sure you don't want a soda while we wait? One officer had moved to the bathroom door and could hear someone in there. He nodded at the detective. Poe, do you have any weapons in here? Me, just the knife by the sink. I handed them each a Coke and took one myself. I yelled into the bathroom, hurry up, we have company. Emily squealed, Mikey. I knew she'd hurry up now. I returned to my seat. There was another knock on the door. This time it was Mike. He came in, grabbed a soda, sat down and looked at the police. He nods to the 2 plainclothes cops and says, detectives. They nodded. Mike, so, what is she claiming you did this time? Me, murder. Mike, cool, who'd you kill? Me, Emily. Mike, damn, I was going to marry that girl. Me, you do and Ka becomes your mother-in-law. Mike, I don't plan on returning from the honeymoon. She'll never find us. Me, I thought that when we left M's place and decided to stay here. Yet here we are. Mike, fair point. How did they find you? Me, good question. Detective, we had your information and we called your home. Your father initially refused to tell us where you were and insisted on calling the precinct directly to make sure it was really the police. Smart man. Then he told us where you were. He would like you to call him when we are done here. I picked up the phone and called my brother. I let him know everything was fine and that I'd call back later with more details. Emily comes out of the bathroom and rushes to see Mike. It takes a second for her to notice the police. Emily, oh good grief. What is she claiming you did this time? Me, murder. Emily, wow, she's pulling out all the stops here. Who'd she say you killed? Kennedy. Me, you. Emily, me. But I'm not dead. Detective, may we see some identification? Emily handed it to him and we gave them the whole story. The officers just shook their heads. Detective, we will let her know that you are alive and that you will contact her when you see fit. We will not disclose your location to her. Me, so she gets away with more harassment. Detective, I'm afraid so. The reality is that we can't prove that there was malicious intent here even though there was. When neither she or anyone else that knows Emily had seen or heard from her in days, she can make the case that she reasonably concluded that Emily was in danger. You were the last person known to be with her, so you are the logical starting point. Me, well thanks for not coming in with guns blazing. Detective, we only do that on television. Randomly shooting up hotel rooms creates lots of paperwork and we hate paperwork. Try and enjoy the rest of your visit here. Me, oh, I will. She goes to court in a few days for car theft and I wouldn't miss that for anything. The incredibly long history of the crazy entitled aunt. The two things most people wanted to know from my initial post is what the fallout from my visit was and why my crazy aunt always hated me. That's it in a nutshell. To be fair, she also hated my brothers, but not as much. She hates my oldest brother because he's a clone of our father. They look like twins born 30 years apart. My younger brother she hated because he's 6'3" Nordic-looking blonde and didn't take her crap but did it in a dismissive manner. As though she was a fly he was swatting away. For years though my sister-in-law was my sister. How was I supposed to know? There was a girl about the age of my brothers living in the house and calling our parents mom and dad. Ka hated her because not only would she not take any crap, but she would shove it down your throat until you choked on it. I should probably point out that my brothers are 18 and 20 years older than I am. The oldest one married at 18 and went into the military. His wife stayed with us often to get her university education. The key here is that she hates anyone who dares to challenge her. My mother was one of 7 children, not unusual back in the pre-birth control days, and was 3 years older than Ka. Good uncle is 2 years younger than Ka. By the time I enter the picture, the other siblings had moved away and largely written Ka off and out of their lives. The shortest version of this goes back to when Ka was a very little girl and had this image of herself and what she would become. She also thought she should have been named Emily. Yeah, that gave everyone pause when she tacked that name onto her newborn daughter. Understand, Ka was born in the 1930s. She still expected to be tall, thin, blonde, and brilliant. She would have fit in well with Hitler. Instead, she was short, 4'11", had dark hair, and it was quite beautiful. My mom and older aunt had it as well, a tendency to gain weight in the middle, and was just average in intelligence. She also lacked the ambition necessary to accomplish the lofty goals she had in mind. But then it was just supposed to happen and she wasn't supposed to actually have to work for it. When she didn't study for a test and received a bad grade, she threw a fit because she was always supposed to get top marks without doing anything for them. She was practicing manifesting abundance decades before The Secret. The smartest person in the world who lacks ambition will not do as well as an average person with a lot of ambition. She never learned that. She had what we in this sub would call typical entitled kid syndrome, but there was nothing external feeding it. No one gave in to her demands and she still got worse over time. She had this idea in her head of how things were supposed to be, but the rest of the world wasn't cooperating. She was so impossible to live with that her first husband, Emily's biological father, finally had to leave. No one in her family blamed him at all. Luckily, she met a docile man that made Emily a great father. That poor sucker married her mostly, I think, to help Emily. At one point, in the 1970s, Ka went back to school and tried to become, wait for it, a psychologist. She didn't make it into the grad school program and instead became an MSW Masters in Social Work. Let that sink in for a minute. Emily is precisely 11 months older than I am. She is also the first girl born in our generation. All of my mother's other siblings had boys. Lots and lots of boys. Then Emily. For 11 glorious months Ka had done something none of them had done and had a girl. Then I took that title away from her. I also had the temerity to be born 6 weeks early and with double pneumonia. Back then either of those things should have killed me. Having both required a miracle and we got it. My mother had an outstanding doctor who managed to save us both. Ka was busy planning the epic first birthday party for Emily. What was everyone in the family doing when they should be talking about Emily and her party? They were talking about me and my mother, checking with each other to see if anyone had heard anything. At one point, Ka called my father and told him that, in her expert opinion, she's a social worker, it would be better to let it die because you already have 2 children and you don't want to be burdened with a sick and mentally retarded baby. My father informed her that they had 3 children and then quit taking her calls. She quit calling because he would pick up, hear her voice, then hang up. My brother and sister-in-law married to my other brother who was in the military did the same thing. For you young people, back in the day you often had to pay for each call you made from your landline, and those calls were recorded each month on your bill. Local calls were charged at a different rate than long distance. Long distance was anything outside of your zone. Many places also charged a per-minute fee as well. A common television trope was dad screaming about the phone bill. The Brady Bunch even put in a payphone in one episode. This was a big deal. Trust me, there were only one bizarre lasting impact on from my birth, a heightened sensitivity to sweets. For that reason I don't generally like things with sugar. This plays in later. The other lasting impact, not really an issue, was a propensity to develop asthma if I were to one day take up smoking. So I didn't. Ka rarely visited because she was a 2-pack-a-day smoker and no one was allowed to smoke in our home. It really wouldn't have been an issue, no more than I would be exposed, but it kept her away so we went with it. I saw Ka only sporadically during my early childhood, mostly at family gatherings when we were in the US. The thing I remember most about them is never being left alone. No matter when I looked up, my father, brothers, mother, or sister-in-law was there. They never left me alone because the first visit we had that I can remember, she freaked out my brother. He describes the way she looked at me and then at Emily was as though she wanted to peel off my skin and switch it with Emily. Most of her comments revolved around how I was too thin, too pale, and too short. She was always trying to get me to eat candy. I never would. Not just because I didn't like it, but because my brother told me never to eat or drink anything she gave me. She said I was spoiled. When discussing this sub with Louis yesterday, he told me that he had nightmares for years where she showed up for a visit and was wearing my skin. So yeah, she creeped him out. Due to my father's job, we moved nations quite a bit. One of those took us to Japan when I was 4. I was bored at home, so my mother let me start school early. By the time we left, 4 years later, I was ready for the American equivalent of junior high school, 7th and 8th grades. In Japan, they wanted students to be with their academic peers and ignored the ages. It was not unusual to find a mix of ages in the classrooms, something not practiced much in the US. While I was in Japan being skipped grades, Ka was in her town not taking Emily to kindergarten. Back then, it was generally for half a day and it interfered with her day to cut it up like that. Her plan was to just start Emily in 1st grade the following year. The problem was that when she went to register Emily, they wouldn't take her based on her age alone. She had to be tested in the basics. She failed, so they put her in kindergarten. Ka was furious at their stupidity because Emily was brilliant. The fault here was not with Emily or her intelligence. It had to do with her never having been exposed to necessary material. She couldn't even sing the alphabet song or tie her shoes. She was just supposed to know these things. Somehow, well, Ka couldn't be bothered, so stepdaddy worked with her and took over school duties. She did great then, but was a year behind her age peers. They had a gifted program that started in the 3rd grade. Ka insisted Emily be put into it. The school said no because it was more than she could handle. Ka threw such a fit that the school caved. Emily failed and had to repeat the 3rd grade. She was humiliated and due to her mother's antics became withdrawn. She never wanted to do anything because she was afraid of her mother getting involved. She always considered me safe because I already knew about her mother and liked her anyway. In a normal family, none of this would matter. Hell, it didn't matter in my family. It did matter to Ka. Partly it was because she didn't get her way. Part of it was because in our absence she had launched a one-woman propaganda machine to promote Emily, and claimed that the real reason my parents had left the country was because of my mental defects. By this time, the only people in the family that spoke to her for more than a death notification were 2 elderly great aunts who thought Ka was a hoot, my mother, and their younger brother. Everyone in the family knew what she was like, so really, it didn't matter. But it did, so much so that no one ever mentioned me in academics. Ever. It was best, for everyone, if she believed that Emily was the smartest kid ever. The next time we saw her, I was 12, Ka went on and on about how gifted Emily was and how she was the top student and so popular ... blah blah blah. It sounded like a press release. Emily just smiled and nodded. When she finished with that, she broke into her litany of how short and thin and pale I was. She told my parents that, in her expert opinion, did I mention that she's a social worker. I exhibited all the signs of anorexia and bulimia. They were getting traction in the news at the time. I never had either. Never saw the point. We all just smiled and nodded. It was a short visit. One of the great aunts had died, so we went for the funeral. Ka had a habit of showing up for a visit. She wouldn't call, she would just appear at the house and stay a few days. This was one of the big reasons her siblings moved and didn't give her the address. She was the kind of person who would wake up in the morning, be bored, and just decide to drive across the country to visit someone. One day she decided to visit us. She had a plan. My parents were diagnosed with different forms of cancer 3 weeks apart. The prognosis was grim. Maybe a year. I was 15. I was in my junior year at the local university. I took a ton of CLEP tests to avoid the first 2 years of generals, but I was still legally a minor. My parents had me emancipated, bought me a car and paid off the house. I would have enough money to support myself until I was legally able to support myself. No matter how smart you are or how many degrees you get, child labor laws still apply. Besides, I had a serious truancy problem. Technically, I wasn't in school. Universities didn't count, so I needed the legal protections that emancipation would give me until I was old enough to drop out of high school. I actually still had to do that. A bizarre story for another time. The younger of my two brothers, Louis, was divorced and had custody of his girls. They lived close to us. I was set to be as okay as a 15-year-old can be when faced with the prospect of losing both her parents within the next few months. Financially, I was fine. Logistically, I was fine. Emotionally, I was a wreck desperately trying to hold it together. I remember the day so well because it was a miserable day all around. It was mid-August. By 7 a.m. it was 90 degrees. It was extremely humid. I had gone to register for my fall classes and pick up my books. Anyone who attended a major university in the late 80s and early 90s probably remembers the nightmare that was registration and book buying. It was hours of waiting in lines only to be told classes were full or canceled, spending hundreds on a single textbook that you would probably never use and certainly never be able to sell. Add to that the problems with traffic and parking ... and I was not in a good mood when I got home and carted all that crap into my room. I was hot, sweaty, and tired. I wanted a shower, some food, and the air conditioning set to popsicle. I took a quick shower and redressed. When I opened my bathroom door, my young niece was sitting there looking irritated. She was 5 and irritation was unusual for her. Mostly it involved her 3-year-old sister. Me, hey, Nikki, what did Annie do? Nikki, nothing. Me, then why do you look irritated? Nikki, Grammy wants you in the kitchen. There are strange people there. I don't like the lady. Me, why not? Nikki, I don't know. I just don't. Grammy doesn't either. She's using her too nice voice. Me, who is it? Nikki, she says her name is Ka. Me, crap. Nikki, now you look like I feel. Can I stay in here? Me, yes, keep your sister in here with you. If you leave, I want you and your sister to stay where I can see you. Nikki, okay. I went out and sure enough I see Emily in the back of Ka's head. Ka turns and her jaw drops. Like my brothers, I waited until I was 13 to really start growing. I ended up at Fiveton. Growing pains are a real thing, by the way. My father is looking highly amused. I was and am still thin and pale. Long blonde hair. Blame my father. His ancestors were from Northern Europe. Mom, how was registration? Me, about like I expected. I got everything I needed and most of what I wanted. Ka, were you registering for school today? Seems a bit early. Did Louis take you? Me, yes, and it's not really early. I drove my car. What brings you here? Ka, well, I heard about your parents and I came up with the perfect solution. You're too young to drive. Me, you discovered a cure for all forms of cancer. Awesome. I have a license. Ka, no, I mean to your problem. I don't approve of young people driving. It gives them naughty ideas. Me, my problem is that my parents have cancer. Cure that and you solve my problem. I don't care what you think about driving. Ka, no, I have a solution for what to do after they are gone. Don't sass me. Me, so you can't cure cancer but you can resurrect the dead. I was going to nominate you for a Nobel. Instead I'll call the Vatican. Don't tell me how to behave. Ka, don't be flip with adults. Your mother raised you better than that. Dad, I helped. Ka, that explains it. Dad, thank you. Me, so what is your grand plan? Ka, you will of course come and live with us. Me, you have got to be kidding me. Ka, I'm not. You can go to school with Emily. You will probably not be in classes as advanced, but I'm sure you will do fine. Me, no. Ka, this matter has been decided and the adults will make the decision. Me, for starters, I have an older brother who I could live with if that were a problem. 2 of them, actually. I also have a house to live in and a car. I have plenty of money and I'm not going anywhere. If I were going to live with an aunt and uncle, it would be good aunt and good uncle who already made the offer. By the way, I'm legally an adult. Most importantly, your opinion on this matter doesn't count. Ka, no you aren't. You are a year younger than Emily. I will sell the car. I don't believe in allowing children to drive. I'm the adult here. Me, I was emancipated. The car is in my name so you can't sell it. My parents are also adults. As am I. You are not a part of this. Stay out of it. Ka, yes I can. I'm the adult in charge of you. Dad, we aren't dead yet. Mom, you have our answer. Me, you will never be in charge of me. You cannot control me. I'm not Emily. Nikki, if she is going to live with anyone it would be with me. She's mine. She has always claimed ownership of me ... told her sister to get her own aunt. Ka, we have better schools and you will even be able to go to Name University if you can get in. Me, I go to different Name now. Ka, you're 15. Me, thank you for pointing out the obvious. By the way, Name headhunted me and I turned them down. I told them I didn't want to live that close to my crazy aunt. Now things are difficult enough for us all emotionally without your insanity. Please leave us alone. You can't have me. Ka, well if you are really attending Name, what's your major? Me, psychology. I plan to be a psychiatrist. Maybe someday I can have you committed. Ka, you are very rude. Me, you can go fuck yourself. That is the only time I ever used profanity in front of my parents. Ka, are you going to allow her to speak to me like that? Dad, when she says something we disagree with we will let her know. "Mom, you made the offer and we appreciate your concern, but the matter has been well handled. We are confident that everything will work out just fine." They stayed for 3 days and I don't think I spoke another word to her after that. She told me that I was rude, disrespectful, and should be ashamed of myself. She demanded I apologize. I walked away. I apologized to my parents for my language. They raised me better than that. My brother took a day off from work to keep his kids away from her. We never left them alone with her and he still didn't want her alone with me. I stayed where I was. After my parents died, and they both lived to see me reach 18, my brother took on an almost father-like role. Sometimes I even attribute things he says as coming from my father. Kind of a mental slip, if you will. The really funny thing is that he sometimes forgets and refers to me as the sister to one of his daughters. So I'm okay. You never get over losing people you love, but you go on. There is really no other choice. Emily is also great. Happily married to Mike. 2 great kids. Ka is dead, but her long-suffering husband lives on with Emily and her family. We don't talk about her mother. I'm sorry this was so long, but many of you asked for the history, and there really isn't a way to shorten it without the details. A glib, "I'm everything she wanted to be" sounds not only conceited but doesn't really explain it. To those of you who have wondered if she was mentally ill, the answer is most certainly a yes. What qualifies as mentally ill now is not the same as back then. She was termed difficult and her behavior generally passed off as such. She was 63 when she died. There was no funeral or memorial service. She was cremated and her ashes dumped in the nearest ocean. She was deathly afraid of water and never learned to swim. Emily made that call. I think that pretty much sums up her feelings on the matter. Mostly I posted this because sometimes entitled people, parents, just happen. Over time, our live and let live society has begun to breed more of them. Partly because the rest of us give in to them. It's often easier. Sometimes, just sometimes, they burst spontaneously out of the ether. Emily suffered as a result of it, and I think that is why she didn't become an entitled kid or become an entitled parent herself. There was so much pain that she didn't want to do that to her children. The real happy ending here is that the entitlement died with Ka.